The Lost Inheritance. Welcome to a journey through time and the human heart. Today I'm going to tell you a story that happened more than 100 years ago, but still resonates in our days with its message of dignity, love, and overcoming. It's the story of Rosa, a woman who discovered that sometimes we lose everything to find our true strength. Where are you watching this video from? Leave me your city in the comments. I want to know how many hearts around the world are united in this narrative. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Your energy makes all the difference so that more stories like this reach you. Now close your eyes for a moment and travel with me to Asia 1907, Diamantina, Minas Gerais, Brazil. A time when the mountains kept secrets among their precious stones, and people's hearts were as deep as the mines that cut through the earth. The smell of melted wax permeated the still air of the house on Rua da Quitanda, mixing with the aroma of spices that still lingered in the empty rooms. Rosa Damasceno adjusted for the last time the embroidered quilt over her husband's motionless body, her fingers trembling like autumn leaves in the cold wind of the Minas morning. 40 years of life, 17 of marriage, and now the deepest silence she had ever experienced. Antonio lay there, his face serene, finally free from the fever that consumed him in 8 terrible days, as if carrying with him a secret he could not confess. The neighborhood women whispered prayers and condolences, but Rosa heard them as if they came from far away. Her gaze wandered over the modest house, simple furniture, whitewashed walls, the oratory in the corner of the room where St. Rita of Cassia watched her with eyes painted with infinite compassion. Dr. Benedito Carvalho, a thin man with round glasses, approached her after the wake, when the last visitors had said goodbye. He carried a worn leather folder and a solemn expression that Rosa could not decipher. "Mrs. Rosa, I need to speak to you about a delicate matter." His voice was soft as the murmur of distant waters. She nodded in silence, wiping away tears with an embroidered handkerchief that Antonio had given her on their first wedding anniversary. "Your husband, he owned rural property, 20 alqueires near the village of Mendanja." The lawyer's words echoed in the air like stones thrown into a deep well. Rosa felt the world tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath her feet were no longer solid. How was it possible? Antonio had never mentioned any land. 10 days had passed since the burial. Rosa had sold everything, every piece of fabric from the store, every sack of spices, every material memory of her life with Antonio. The coins clinked in her cloth bag like dried tears, sufficient only to settle debts and pay for the journey. Sebastião the muleteer's cart swayed along the rocky paths that wound between hills covered with vegetation. 4 days' journey to Mendanja, 120 kilometers of red earth and infinite sky. Rosa watched the landscape change gradually, the stone houses of Diamantina giving way to adobe huts, the movement of gold prospectors transforming into the slow rhythm of the deeper interior. Her fingers caressed the deed that Dr. Benedito had given her. The yellowed paper spoke of a property bought by Antonio in 1901, 6 years ago. 6 years of silence about 20 alqueires of land, a parallel life she knew nothing about. The village of Mendanja appeared at the end of the 4th day's afternoon, like a mirage among the hills. Small, with its 180 inhabitants, a church whitewashed in the center of the square, and houses scattered like seeds throughout the valley. Rosa breathed deeply, the air laden with dust and hope. The property was 2 leagues from the village. When they finally spotted it, Rosa's heart leaped. A house of wood and stone, robust and welcoming, surrounded by an orchard that extended as far as the eye could see, and at the top of a small hill, a little white chapel that shone like a pearl against the purple sky of dusk. "Antonio, what secret world did you build here?" The house door opened before Rosa could knock. A woman of about 30 years appeared in the threshold, her face marked by wild beauty and eyes that shone with a dangerous light. In her arms she carried a baby that couldn't be more than a few months old. "You must be Rosa." Her voice cut through the air like a razor. "I am Maria de los Dolores, and this is my house." The world seemed to pause around Rosa. The wind stopped blowing through the fruit trees, the birds fell silent, even the baby remained in absolute silence. "Your house," Rosa managed to murmur, the deed trembling in her hands. Maria de los Dolores laughed, a bitter sound like dry grass. "I was Antonio's lover for 6 years. This is his son." She lifted the baby as if it were irrefutable proof. "And this property has belonged to me for 4 years. I have the documents." She pulled from a nearby drawer a deed that seemed newer, better cared for than Rosa's. The letters danced before the widow's eyes like snakes on the yellowed paper. "You have no right here," Maria continued, her voice gaining strength. "Antonio told me about you. The barren wife he had to endure out of social obligation. But his true love was here, with me and our son." Rosa felt as if each word were a dagger, not from the pain of betrayal. Something inside her whispered that this couldn't be true, but from the calculated cruelty of the situation. She slowly retreated like a wounded animal to the cart, where Sebastião waited in respectful silence. "Look for Doña Jacinta's boarding house," Maria shouted as Rosa moved away. "And leave Mendana tomorrow. This land is no place for ghosts of the past." How can a heart break so many times in so few days? Doña Jacinta's boarding house smelled of strong coffee and nostalgia. It was a simple two-story construction with small rooms and walls that seemed to guard the stories of all the travelers who had passed through. Rosa occupied a room at the back where the noise from the street didn't reach, and she could cry in peace. 3 weeks passed like dense fog. Rosa sought out Delegate Otavio Santos, a fat man with a graying mustache, who received her with feigned courtesy. When she mentioned Maria de los Dolores and Colonel Firmino Borges, the girl's uncle, as she had discovered, the delegate completely changed his posture. "Mrs. Rosa, it's better if you forget this story and return to Diamantina," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Certain people have protection around here, you understand." In her second attempt to speak with Maria de los Dolores, Rosa felt a strange taste in the coffee they offered her. Her stomach twisted all night, and Doña Jacinta cared for her with teas and prayers, whispering that this was no natural illness. It was on an afternoon with a sky heavy with rain that Juan Ribeiro appeared at the boarding house. He was a man of 43 years, his face marked by sun and work, but with gentle eyes that contrasted with his calloused hands. Widowed for 5 years, owner of a farm neighboring Antonio's property. "Mrs. Rosa," he said, removing his hat in an old-fashioned courtesy. "I heard about your situation. Perhaps I can help you." They sat on the boarding house gallery while the rain began to fall, first like scattered tears, then like copious weeping that washed the dust from the streets and hearts. Could there still be goodness in this confused world? João Ribeiro possessed a rare characteristic in that world of appearances and lies. He observed everything carefully. During the 6 years he had been a neighbor to the property, he had never seen Antonio there, not even once. "It's strange," he told Rosa, while they sipped coffee on the boarding house gallery. "A property of that size, and I never saw the owner." Maria de los Dolores appeared about 2 years ago, always alone, always fleeing when someone tried to talk. Rosa felt a spark of hope igniting in her chest. João had something she lacked, local knowledge, and more importantly, no one feared him, as they feared Colonel Firmino. With a carefully planned strategy, João obtained a copy of Maria de los Dolores' documents through an acquaintance who worked at the registry office. Then he mounted his horse and departed on a 3-day journey to Ouro Preto, where the oldest records were kept and where the region's best document experts worked. While he was away, Rosa spent her days walking the dusty streets of Mendana, observing the simple routine of the village. Women washed clothes in the stream, men talked about weather and harvests, children ran barefoot among the adobe houses. But whenever she passed near Antonio's property, she felt a tightness in her chest. The house remained closed. Maria de los Dolores left only to buy provisions, always carrying the baby like a shield. At the end of the first week of waiting, Rosa received a letter from João. The letters seemed to dance with excitement on the paper. "Rosa, I discovered something important. The documents are false. I'll return in 2 days with proof. Stay safe." "João, can truth be more powerful than all the lies in the world?" João returned on an afternoon of relentless sun, his horse covered with sweat and dust from the road. He brought with him a folder of documents and a smile that Rosa hadn't seen for so long. She had almost forgotten what hope looked like. They sat in the same place on the gallery where they had first talked. João opened the folder carefully, like someone unveiling a treasure. "Rosa, prepare yourself," he said gently. Everything Maria de los Dolores said was a lie. The documents she had presented were crude forgeries, according to the experts in Ouro Preto. The ink was newer than the indicated dates. The paper didn't correspond to the alleged period, and most importantly, there was no record whatsoever of the sale of Antonio's property to Maria de los Dolores. "And the baby?" Rosa asked, her voice trembling. "Borrowed," João replied sadly. "A woman from the neighboring village confirms that Maria de los Dolores pays her to carry the child when necessary." Rosa felt as if she were emerging from deep, murky waters, finally able to breathe. The air entered her lungs clean and pure, laden with the aroma of flowers from Antonio's orchard. "But why?" she whispered. "Colonel Firmino tried to buy Antonio's property several times. When your husband died, he saw the perfect opportunity. Maria de los Dolores is his niece, and he used her to try to steal your land." João showed more documents, letters from the colonel to interested buyers, plans to divide the property into smaller lots, correspondence that revealed the entire conspiracy. Rosa closed her eyes and for the first time in weeks smiled. A tear rolled down her face, but this time it was from relief, not pain. Truth, like the sun, always finds a way to shine through the darkest clouds. Judge Candido Pereira was a man of integrity, a rarity in that world of favors and cronyism. When João and Rosa arrived at the district headquarters with all the evidence, he received them with the seriousness the case deserved. "This is a serious situation," said the judge, studying the false documents through his thick lenses. "Forgery of deeds, attempted fraud, conspiracy. I'm ordering immediate investigation." 2 days later, the officers of justice headed to the property. Rosa accompanied them, her heart beating like a June festival drum. When Maria de los Dolores saw the committee approaching, her defiant posture crumbled like a sandcastle. The baby, as João had discovered, was returned to its true mother that same afternoon. Maria de los Dolores, confronted with irrefutable evidence and the threat of prison, collapsed in tears and confessions. "My uncle promised me half the money from the sale," she sobbed, her hands trembling. "He said it was just to pretend until we could sell the land, that no one would care about a widow without family." Colonel Firmino Borges was arrested a week later, accused of document forgery and attempted fraud. His lands were confiscated to pay fines, and Maria de los Dolores, forgiven through Rosa's intercession, went to work as a seamstress in a distant city. Rosa could finally enter the house that Antonio had built in secret. The keys trembled in her hands as she turned the lock, hearing the soft click that opened the door to a new life. Sometimes justice delays, but when it comes, it arrives accompanied by a peace worth all the tears shed. The house was even more beautiful inside than Rosa had imagined. Jacaranda furniture, pure white linen curtains, an iron stove that radiated warmth even when cold. But it was in the small chapel atop the hill that Rosa found the true treasure. Behind the simple altar, hidden in a cavity in the stone wall, there was a carved wooden chest. Rosa opened it with hands trembling with emotion and found a letter in Antonio's familiar handwriting, yellowed with time and perfumed with the aroma of dried flowers he had kept alongside. "My dear Rosa, if you are reading this, it's because I departed before being able to show you our dream. I built this property thinking of our final years together, far from the noise of the city, close to God and the earth. The chapel is for both of us. I want to be buried here when my time comes, beside the one who will be my companion for all eternity." Rosa had to pause her reading, tears blurring her vision. She continued with a broken voice. "The seeds kept in this chest are from rare medicinal plants I collected in my trading journeys. I know of your gift for healing with herbs. Use this knowledge to help people and guarantee our independence. The money kept here is our future, my love. Forgive me for keeping the secret, but I wanted to surprise you when everything was ready." In the chest, there were still enough gold coins to live with dignity for many years, documents that legally proved ownership of the land, and small seed bags carefully labeled with instructions for planting and medicinal use. Rosa sat on the chapel floor, surrounded by the treasures left by Antonio, and wept. But this time they were tears of gratitude, of understanding, of a love that not even death had managed to destroy. Outside, João waited respectfully, giving her the necessary time to absorb all the revelations. When she emerged from the chapel, her eyes red but her face at peace, he merely smiled and extended his hand. True love never dies. It only transforms, like seed that becomes tree, like tear that becomes smile. In the months that followed, Rosa transformed the property into a true natural pharmacy. She planted Antonio's seeds, following his detailed instructions, and soon the ground around the house flourished with medicinal herbs of every type. João helped her with the heavier work, rebuilding fences, planting corn and beans, tending the orchard that had produced abundant fruit that year. They worked in harmonious silence, communicating through looks and gestures that made words unnecessary. The people of Mendanja began seeking her out when the fame of her remedies spread. Doña Aparecida came first with joint pains, Then came Señor Manuel with digestive problems, then the blacksmith's daughter with a persistent cough. Rosa received everyone with infinite patience, preparing teas, ointments and tinctures in the kitchen that had transformed into a healing laboratory. She never charged money. She accepted chickens, eggs, a sack of flour, a handful of vegetables. The exchange was fair and kept everyone's dignity alive. In the afternoon, when work ended, Rosa and João would sit on the house gallery, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. They talked about plants, about the people who came seeking help, about the small daily miracles they witnessed. One day, Rosa realized she was looking at João not just as a generous friend, but as a man who made her heart beat faster. And when she caught the same look in him, she knew that love, like medicinal plants, can sprout in the most unlikely terrain. Healing comes not just from herbs, but from the care with which they are prepared, and the hope with which they are offered. A year had passed since Antonio's death, and Rosa decided it was time to fulfill his last request. With João's help and that of some men from the village, she transferred her first husband's remains from Diamantina's cemetery to the small chapel on the property. The ceremony was simple and moving. The priest from Mendanha's church blessed the new sepulchre, and Rosa placed fresh flowers from the orchard on the smooth stone tombstone. There was no sadness in that moment, only the sensation of duty fulfilled and peace finally achieved. That same afternoon, when all the visitors had left and the sun was setting behind the mountains, João took courage to express in words what his eyes had been saying for months. "Rosa," he said gently, taking her work-calloused hands, "you brought light to my life. Might I dare to dream of a future by your side?" She didn't respond with words. Her lips found his in a kiss, soft as evening breeze, and both knew this was the most sincere yes they could give. They married 3 months later, in the same little chapel where Antonio rested in peace. Rosa wore a simple white cotton dress, embroidered by her own hands with wildflowers. João wore his best suit, but what shone brightest on him was his smile of genuine happiness. The farm prospered under the couple's care. They raised dairy cattle, expanded cheese production, and maintained the natural pharmacy that had become famous throughout the region. Rosa taught João the secrets of medicinal plants, and he showed her the mysteries of land and animals. 2 wounded hearts can heal each other, creating a love even stronger than the first. 2 years after their marriage, the property had transformed into the center of prosperity and healing for the entire region. People came from distant villages seeking Rosa's remedies, and many ended up staying to buy João's cheeses or fruit from the revitalized orchard. Rosa discovered she had abilities beyond natural medicine. She organized the region's women to weave together, creating a cooperative that sold fabrics and embroidery in larger cities. João, for his part, improved cattle-raising techniques and began providing selected calves to ranchers in other regions. The house gained new rooms, a consulting room where Rosa treated the sick, a modern cheese-making facility where João perfected his recipes, a sewing workshop where women gathered to work and talk. What had once been a secret property had become the beating heart of a community. On full moon nights, Rosa would climb to the chapel where Antonio rested and tell him about the farm's progress. She spoke of the healing she had managed to achieve, the friends she had gained, the love she had found with João. She felt that he approved of everything, that his blessing hovered over that place like the perfume of wild flowers. João had never shown jealousy of Antonio's memory. On the contrary, he seemed to understand that Rosa's first husband was part of their story, and that honoring that memory made their current love more precious. One December afternoon, while harvesting oranges in the orchard, Rosa felt a wave of pure joy. She looked around, the trees laden with fruit, the green fields, João humming a work song, and understood that sometimes life takes everything from us to give us something even better. Gratitude is like seed planted in fertile soil. It always produces sweet and abundant fruit. The 3rd year of marriage brought the most abundant rain the region had seen in decades. The streams overflowed, the pastures turned greenest green, and the farm reached a level of prosperity that surpassed all dreams. Rosa discovered she was pregnant one September morning when the smell of coffee caused her nausea for the first time in her life. João cried when she told him the news, knelt before her, and kissed her still flat belly, whispering prayers of gratitude. They began receiving visits from important people. Doctors from Diamantina came to learn from Rosa about natural medicine. Merchants from Ouro Preto wanted to negotiate exclusivity in distributing her products. But they always kept their feet on the ground and their doors open to those in need. The child was born on a March afternoon when the orchard's first flowers bloomed after winter. It was a strong and healthy boy with dark eyes like João's and delicate hands like Rosa's. They named him Antonio, in homage to the man who had made everything possible. 2 years later, a girl arrived, tiny but bright, whom Rosa called Esperanza. The family was complete, the farm prosperous, and the surrounding community flourishing like a well-tended garden. On quiet nights, when the children slept and the moon illuminated the fields, Rosa and João would sit on the gallery and observe the world they had built together. Antonio's secret property had transformed into a home open to all, a place of healing and abundance. Sometimes God writes our stories with invisible ink, and we can only read them when we look back with eyes of gratitude. 10 years had passed since Antonio's death, and Rosa, now 50 years old, was respected as the great healer of the entire mountainous region. Her children grew healthy. Antonio, already 7 years old, helping his father care for the cattle, and Esperanza, 5, always by her mother's side learning the secrets of medicinal plants. It was on an August afternoon, while organizing Antonio's old documents, that Rosa made a discovery that would forever change her understanding of the past. At the bottom of the chapel chest, she found a letter she had never seen before, hidden in a secret fold of the lining. With hands trembling with emotion, she read the words her first husband had written shortly before dying. "My beloved Rosa, if you have reached this point, it's because God wanted you to know the whole truth. 3 months ago, I discovered that Colonel Firmino planned to appropriate our lands after my death. I also learned that he would use Maria de los Dolores, his niece, for this purpose. That's why I kept our property secret, not to hide it from you, but to protect you from him. Forgive me for the necessary conspiracy, my love. This land is your future, your freedom, your true inheritance." Rosa sat on the chapel floor, the letter trembling in her hands. Antonio knew. He had foreseen everything, planned her protection even beyond death. It had not been coincidence that João appeared just when she needed him most. The neighboring rancher had been sought out by Antonio months before dying, asked to care for Rosa if something happened to him. She ran down to the house where João was working in the workshop fixing a cartwheel. Without words, she handed him the letter. He read in silence, then looked at her with a smile full of tenderness. "Did you know?" Rosa asked, her voice choked with emotion. "I knew he had sought me out," João replied gently, "but I discovered the property because of you, Rosa, and I fell in love with you, not because of a dead man's request." In that moment, Rosa understood that she had been protected and loved by 2 extraordinary men, each in his own way. Antonio, the love of youth who had planned her future. João, the love of maturity who had built a new life with her. True love transcends death and finds mystical ways to continue protecting those we love. 15 years had passed since that afternoon, when Rosa discovered the complete truth about Antonio's inheritance. The farm had become a small, prosperous town, with a school, enlarged chapel, and a natural hospital where people came from throughout the state seeking healing. Her children grew strong and wise. Antonio, now 22, had studied modern agriculture and brought innovative techniques to cattle raising. Esperanza, at 20, had become an even more skilled healer than her mother, with hands that seemed blessed by angels. Rosa, at 55, had found complete peace. Her graying hair shone like silver in the sun, and her eyes held the wisdom of one who had lived deep losses and immense joys. João, her companion of 2 decades, had aged beside her with the same dignity, their love maturing like fine wine. On a golden October afternoon, while watching their grandchildren play in the orchard, Esperanza had married a doctor from the capital and Antonio, a teacher from the region. Rosa climbed to the chapel for her daily conversation with her first husband. "Antonio," she whispered, caressing the tombstone covered with fresh flowers, "thank you for everything, for protecting me, for leaving me this blessed land, for putting João in my path. I know you are at peace, as I finally am." The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying the perfume of orchard flowers and the distant sound of children's laughter. Rosa smiled, feeling she was receiving a silent but clear response. She descended the hill hand in hand with João, who had waited patiently as he always had. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky rose and gold, and the property that had once been secret now sheltered 3 generations of love, work, and hope. That night, Rosa wrote in her diary the words that summarized her journey. Sometimes we lose everything to discover that we actually gained a whole life. Love never dies. It only changes form, like water that becomes cloud, like seed that becomes tree. I was blessed with two great loves and a land that taught me the true meaning of the word home. End of narrative.